Tower of Babel wasn't just a tower, but something far more dangerous? Was it a weapon, or did it hold a secret about humanity? And what if the real reason it was destroyed was a desperate attempt to keep you from discovering the truth about what you really are? Think about it. Why would an all-powerful God, someone who supposedly created the entire universe, be so afraid of it? Did he really think it could reach heaven? What was that about? Today we're exploring the real reason that God destroyed the Tower of Babel, and by the end of this video, you'll see the tower in a way you've never imagined. This is hidden knowledge that's been buried for centuries. Let me ask you this. Have you ever felt like the world is designed to keep you small and contained? Like everything around you is built to divide, distract, and disempower you? What you're about to learn will make all of that make sense. This isn't just some story from ancient texts. This is your story, and it's time you found out the truth. Now, I want you to think about how strange this story is. It's not a test of faith or punishment. This is about control. It's about keeping humanity divided and powerless. It's about taking away something so dangerous to those in power that it had to be buried beneath layers of fear and confusion. My name is Morg, and I'm an ex-Christian revealing hidden information the church doesn't want you to know. And you'll learn secrets that were never meant to be uncovered, because what we're about to explore is not just about the Tower of Babel, it's about you, your power, and the lengths to which someone will go to keep you from discovering it. First, make sure to like and subscribe if you're into uncovering hidden truths. It really helps get this out to more people who need to hear it. Also, check out my book Neo-Genesis, Dawn of the New Mind. Links are in the description. So what was the Tower of Babel really about? Why was it destroyed? And what does it have to do with you? Well, let's start with the version of the story you've probably heard before, the one straight out of Genesis. Humanity, united as one, decides to build a city with a massive tower that stretches all the way to heaven. They're ambitious, working together, speaking the same language, and driven by a single goal to make a name for themselves and avoid being scattered across the earth. But then something weird happens. God sees what they're building, and instead of cheering on their teamwork or being proud of their unity, he freaks out. In Genesis 11:6, God says, "If as one people speaking the same language they have begun to do this, then nothing they plan to do will be impossible for them." Nothing they plan to do will be impossible? That sounds less like a loving creator and more like someone terrified of losing control. So what does God do? He confuses their language and scatters them across the earth, totally stopping the project. And that's it. That's supposed to explain why we all speak different languages today. Well, let's stop and really think about this for a second. Does this make sense? Humanity finally united, decides to build something extraordinary, a tower, and not just any tower, but the symbol of ambition, creativity, and collective power. Imagine the beauty of this. People working together, speaking the same language, putting aside their differences and creating something magnificent, totally different than the divided world we see today. This wasn't about war, it wasn't destruction, it wasn't greed. It was humanity at its absolute best. And what does God do? He looks at that and says, nope, can't have that. Better shut this down before they figure out how to build Wi-Fi. Seriously? He doesn't say, wow, look at my children cooperating, creating, reaching for the stars? No. Instead, he says, I better destroy this before they figure out what they're really capable of. What? Is that a reaction of a loving creator? Or is that the reaction of someone who's terrified of what we might become? See, even as a kid, I thought, wait, so we built a tower and God just freaked out? That doesn't sound very godlike. Now, really think about this. The Bible says that humans were building the tower to reach heaven, and God believed we could actually do it. Doesn't that sound a little strange to you? Wouldn't they die first because of the low oxygen at that height? Not to mention a tower that tall is physically impossible to build. Or what about just hitting space and floating away? Are we really supposed to believe this was about a physical tower? Or is there something much bigger hiding beneath this story? So here's where the questions start piling up. If God is omnipotent, why would he be threatened by anything humans could do? And here's the critical question. Why would a supposedly loving creator stop humanity from working together, from being united, from achieving something extraordinary? Unless this story isn't really about God protecting humanity. What if it's about keeping humanity in the dark? What if the Tower of Babel represents something so powerful, so dangerous to those in control, that it had to be destroyed at all costs? What if this wasn't even about a building at all, but about keeping you from realizing your true potential? Now let's take a step back from the traditional interpretation and dive into something a lot more shocking and controversial. The Gnostic perspective. So you see, early Gnostic Christians didn't see the God of the Old Testament as the loving creator we've been taught to worship. No, to them, this so-called God was something a lot darker. They believed he was a jealous, evil being, the demiurge, who trapped humanity in ignorance and suffering to maintain control. So when I first read about the Gnostic perspective, it blew my mind. Suddenly all these questions that I had about the Bible, like why God always seems so insecure, started to make a lot more sense. What if the God I was taught to worship wasn't the good guy in the story? According to the Gnostics, this wasn't the true God at all, but a fake, a fraud, a cosmic dictator who wanted to keep us from discovering the divine spark within ourselves. Now hold on just for a minute. So what if everything that you've been told about the God of the Old Testament was actually a lie? What if the being who scattered the people at the Tower of Babel wasn't protecting humanity but imprisoning it? If the Gnostics were right, this God wasn't terrified of a physical tower. He was terrified of what the tower symbolized. Now let's go even deeper into this rabbit hole, because one weird Bible story just isn't enough for today. To understand the Tower of Babel from the Gnostic perspective, we need to go back to the beginning, not just of humanity, but of the war between the God of the Bible and the divine essence within us. According to the Gnostic teachings, humanity wasn't created to serve this God. In fact, we were once beings of pure light, fragments of the divine source, and we were far more powerful than the God described in the Old Testament. And that's precisely why he declared war on us, because nothing says all-powerful God like picking a fight with your own creation. See, Gnostics believed that the so-called God of the Bible, who they called the demiurge, saw humanity as a threat. Why? Because we were originally gods, more powerful than him, connected to a source of infinite light and wisdom. Don't believe me? Even the Bible hints at this. In Psalm 82:6 it says, I said, you are gods, you are all sons of the Most High. Even Jesus says this in John 10:34. Jesus replied, it is written in your own scriptures that God said to certain leaders of the people, I say, you are gods. So to maintain his control, the demiurge devised a plan to trap us as spiritual divine beings into the material world, stripping us of our divine awareness. So his first act of war was by trapping us in bodies, encasing fragments of divine light in fragile, mortal forms. But apparently this wasn't enough. Even stuck in those fragile, mortal forms, humanity still had the potential to remember what we were. So the demiurge took it a step further. He split us in two, masculine and feminine, representing mind and intuition, dividing our power to make us weaker, more controllable. Kind of a weird strategy for a self-proclaimed omnipotent deity, don't you think? It's kind of like splitting your opponent's army in half while forgetting that, hey, they can still team up and kick your ass. And sure enough, that's what humanity tried to do. They retained enough of its divine spark to resist his control, and that's where we get to the story of Adam and Eve. See, the demiurge gave humanity one command: don't eat from the tree of knowledge. Why? Well, because knowledge is power, and in eating the forbidden fruit, humanity took its first step towards awakening. Genesis 3:5 says exactly why. For God knows that when you eat from it, your eyes will be opened and you will be like God, knowing good and evil. And in Genesis 3:22, it says, and the Lord God said, the man has now become like one of us. Think about that. God himself admits he didn't want humanity to awaken to its potential. This wasn't about protecting Adam and Eve, it was about control, keeping them ignorant and subservient. Adam and Eve realized that they were more than slaves, that they were divine. And in their union, they created something even more dangerous to the demiurge, a child named Seth. According to Gnostic tradition, Seth wasn't just some kid, he was the symbolic unification of what the demiurge had split apart. He represented the balance of masculine and feminine mind and intuition working together as one. And this, my friends, terrified the demiurge, because Seth's lineage carried the potential to wake up, to remember their divine origins, and to overthrow this cosmic overlord. In the apocalypse of Adam says, listen to my words, my son Seth. We resembled the great eternal angels, for we were higher than the God who had created us. Then God divided us in wrath. Then we became two, and we served him in fear and slavery. So Seth's descendants, like Seth himself, contained the balanced opposites of masculine and feminine within themselves, meaning they had the ability to wake up, and they started to awaken to their divine nature, and guess what? They stopped worshiping the demiurge. They didn't fear him anymore, and they did not accept his control, and this terrified him. If humanity fully awakened, he knew they would surpass him. So what did he do? He decided to wipe them out. Enter the story of the flood. See, the God of the Bible acts like a kid who gets mad when they're losing a board game and just flips the whole table over. Even as a kid, I thought that that sounded a little extreme. Now, while the Bible claims the flood was sent because humanity was wicked, the Gnostics tell a completely different story. The flood was the demiurge's attempt to destroy those who were waking up. But the demiurge didn't succeed. While he drowned the earth in chaos, a divine light, the true source of reality, intervened, and a cloud of light descended and saved Seth's descendants. It lifted them out of the floodwaters and preserved this lineage of awakening. The demiurge may have won the battle, but he didn't win the war. And this brings us to the Tower of Babel, because it comes right after the flood. Don't you think it's a little weird God won't stop fucking with humanity? Humanity, still carrying the divine spark within, united once more, and together they began to build a tower, a symbol of their collective power, their refusal to be scattered and controlled. The Tower of Babel wasn't about bricks and mortar. It was about reclaiming the divine light. It was about unity, enlightenment, and transcending the material prison that the demiurge created. Terrified of what humanity might achieve, the demiurge struck again. He scattered humanity, confused their language, and shattered their unity. But even then, the divine spark wasn't extinguished. The war between the demiurge and humanity continues today because each of us carry the potential to remember who we really are. Now, we're going to go even deeper here. In a banned Gnostic text known as the Paraphrase of Shem, the Tower of Babel takes on a whole new meaning. It's part of a cosmic war. A war between light and darkness, knowledge and ignorance, humanity and the forces trying to keep it enslaved. And here's where things get dark. In the Paraphrase of Shem, the God who scattered the builders of the tower isn't the benevolent creator we've been told to worship. No. This so-called God is revealed to be something a lot darker, a demon of ignorance, a being whose entire purpose is to flood the world with chaos, confusion, and division, all to keep humanity from reaching the light. The Paraphrase of Shem says, "And he caused a flood, and he destroyed your race to take the light." The flood in this text isn't just water, it's symbolic of what? Of the unconscious mind. It represents drowning humanity in the darkness of ignorance, keeping us blind to our true potential. See, this is not a God protecting us, it's a cosmic tyrant waging war on the very light that lives within. In the Paraphrase of Shem, right after the flood, the light proclaims the creation of a tower. Yeah, that's right, a tower, built through the very forces of darkness that were trying to suppress it. It's kind of like the light used the enemy's own weapons against them. This tower was a symbol of resilience and of humanity's refusal to be drowned in ignorance. It was a beacon reaching up to the divine light of consciousness, even in the face of overwhelming chaos of the waters of ignorance. This is a story of rebellion and resistance, of humanity fighting back against the forces that try to keep it small and limited. And this is where it gets fascinating, because the Tower of Babel is not about a literal building. It's a metaphor for something a lot more powerful, humanity's collective awakening to its divine potential, a new level of awareness. When humans unite, when we work together and transcend the divisions forced on us, we can access something incredible, a higher state of consciousness, a divine state. The tower wasn't about reaching heaven in the physical sense. It was about realizing that heaven, that divinity, is within us. Now think about what that means. If humanity came together, if we truly understood our potential and the divine spark we all carry, we wouldn't need to worship any external God. We wouldn't need to fear punishment of hell or obey commands from a tyrannical deity. We would transcend him. And that, according to the Gnostics, is exactly what this so-called God feared the most. See, the Tower of Babel wasn't a threat because of its height or its ambition. Nobody was actually worried that it might pierce through the clouds and smack an angel in the face. It was a threat because it represented unity. It represented humanity realizing that it didn't need to be divided, didn't need to live in fear, it didn't need to stay ignorant. This wasn't about stacking bricks, it was about awakening. It was about freedom. And isn't that the ultimate irony? The God of Genesis didn't stop the tower to protect us, he stopped it to keep us enslaved. He didn't scatter us out of love. How does that make sense? He did it out of fear. Fear that we might remember what we really are, that we might ascend and leave him behind. Think about it. If God is all-powerful, why the hell would he care about a bunch of humans stacking bricks? Why would an omnipotent being feel threatened by us working together? Isn't that a good thing? Is it because we might have built something taller than his ego? What if it wasn't about the tower at all? What if it was about our unity? What if God didn't fear the height of the tower? He feared what it represented, a humanity that wasn't divided, a humanity realizing its potential, a humanity that didn't need him. Here's the thing, you don't scatter people and confuse their language out of love. You do that when you're freaking out and you don't have a backup plan. You do that out of fear. Fear that if we stayed united, we'd realize we didn't need to bow to anyone. Fear that we'd look around and say, hey, maybe heaven isn't someplace out there. Maybe it's something we can build right here, in our minds and all around us. That's what the Tower of Babel was, a symbol of human potential. And if you ask me, God didn't destroy it because he wanted to protect us. He destroyed it because he wanted to control us. Now let me ask you this. What does that say about the world we live in today? A world where we are still divided by language, culture, race, politics. A world where the systems in place seem designed to keep us fighting each other, distracted, powerless. Is this just a coincidence? Or is the same force that scattered the Tower of Babel still working to keep us apart? See, the story of the tower is actually a warning about a battle that's happening right now. It's a glimpse into this ongoing struggle between light and darkness, which means knowledge and ignorance, freedom and control. The real question isn't about a tower that was destroyed thousands of years ago. The real question is, what will it take for us to build a new one? Not with bricks, but with unity, with knowledge, with the understanding that we're not separate from the divine, that we are the divine. Now, let's take a step back here. Are these stories literally true? No. Now, people come to my channel constantly saying that I believe in these things literally. That's ridiculous. Of course I don't. And I'm very clear about this. Obviously, I'm not here to argue that the Tower of Babel, as described in Genesis, or even the Gnostic version of events, actually happened. That's crazy. These are stories. But countless people have thought and died because of these stories. They're powerful. These are symbolic, ancient attempts to communicate profound truths about the human experience. And what are those truths? At its core, the Gnostic story, whether it's about the flood, the Tower of Babel, or even the Garden of Eden, is about one battle, the war between knowledge and ignorance. Gnosticism itself gets its name from the Greek word gnosis, which means knowledge. To them, ignorance wasn't just a lack of understanding, it was the root of all evil. It's what kept humanity trapped, divided, and powerless. The Gospel of Philip says, ignorance is the mother of all evil. Not sin, not disobedience, ignorance. And the Tower of Babel represented the ultimate weapon against ignorance. Humanity working together, united on a common goal of reaching the highest levels of consciousness. This tower wasn't a structure. It's a symbol of resilience, a cosmic middle finger to the forces of ignorance. So here's what I want you to do. Ask yourself, what are you doing today to push back against ignorance? To wake up or help others wake up? I know this battle personally. Growing up, I was taught to take these stories literally, and it made no sense that God constantly made knowledge forbidden. Apparently God loves you, but not enough to let you think for yourself. And let me tell you, when I finally started asking questions, it felt like breaking free from chains that I didn't even know I was wearing. Think about the Garden of Eden. Adam and Eve are told not to eat from the tree of knowledge. Why? Because knowledge represents awakening. It represents the power to see beyond the illusions of control. But when they do eat, they realize the truth. They are divine, not slaves. And what's the demiurge's response? To cast them out, to curse them, to trap them in a world of suffering. Fast forward to the flood. From the Gnostic perspective, it wasn't about punishing humanity for being evil. It was about silencing those who were waking up. It was about drowning the light of knowledge in the waters of ignorance. But even then, the divine spark wasn't extinguished, and Seth's descendants were saved in a cloud of light. And what did they do? They came together again to build the Tower of Babel. Humanity unites, rebuilds. What happens? God scatters them, and their unity is destroyed. Why? Because together they were unstoppable. Together they had the potential to ascend to the light, and that's the one thing the forces of ignorance, of darkness, could not allow. So what do these ancient stories have to do with your life? Everything. The Tower of Babel isn't just some forgotten chapter in the Bible. It's a blueprint for understanding the world we live in today. The forces of division, ignorance, and fear that scattered humanity then are at work right now. They might not come in the form of an angry asshole of a god confusing our languages, but they show up in every system designed to keep us apart. Politics, religion, media, even our own fears and internal insecurities. So ask yourself, have you ever felt like this world is rigged against you? Like no matter how hard you try, something's holding you back. Well, that's not your imagination. It's by design. The same forces that scattered humanity at Babel are still keeping us divided today. The forces of ignorance. Because when we're divided, we're powerless. And when we're powerless, we can't realize the one thing that they fear most, our own potential. But here's the truth they don't want you to know. This light, it wasn't destroyed, it wasn't lost, it's still there within you, within me, within all of us. And the moment we stop fighting each other, stop buying into the lies that keep us divided, we can start to rebuild. Not with bricks, but with understanding, unity, and knowledge. Knowledge that we're not separate from the divine, that we are the divine. For me, stepping away from what I was taught and stepping into what I could discover for myself was the most liberating thing I've ever done. So here's the real question. Will you stay scattered and divided, just another piece in someone else's game? Or will you start building your own tower of light now? Not a tower that reaches to some heaven in the clouds, but one that reconnects you with the divine spark that's been inside you all along. The power to unite, to create, to rise above the chaos, the ignorance. That power is yours. The only question is, are you ready to access it? Remember this, the forces that divide us at Babel are afraid of one thing. It will wake up. It will realize who we really are. It will stop letting them control us and start building something extraordinary. The question isn't whether we can, because we can. It's whether we will. So what's your answer? So here's the truth they never wanted you to understand. The Tower of Babel wasn't ever a real building about bricks or mortar. It was about unity, knowledge, and the power that we possess when we come together. When we unite, we become unstoppable. That's the real secret. That's what they've been trying to keep from us all this time. So what do you think? Is the Tower of Babel literally true? Or is it just a myth? Or is it a message about what humanity is truly capable of when we work together? Tell me in the comments. I want to hear your thoughts, your interpretations, and what this story means to you. But here's the thing. The demiurge didn't stop at destroying the Tower of Babel. He turned his sights on to the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah. And if you want to know why, check out my video, The Real Reason God Destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah. Check out my book, Neogenesis, Dawn of the New Mind, and become a member to get access to members-only videos, unlock exclusive downloadable PDFs all about hidden knowledge, personal transformation, and more.